Greetings, I'm James Hudson. Welcome to Avatars and Self-Fashioning, which will discuss the metaverse and the negotiation of identity for the purposes of supporting capability. Thank you for allowing me to be here to speak to you virtually today at the 14th International Conference on the Image. It's great to be here, and we'll get started. Now, digital identity is something that has been evolving ever since the internet began in the mid to late 90s, beginning with chat rooms in which one could change one's identity or name at will and become whomever they wished. Now, of course, we have much more sophisticated tools which allow us to create visual representations of ourselves. And this has been happening ever since Second Life, which we will discuss here shortly. Now, what is different, though, is tethering a specific avatar's identity, whether it looks like you or a cartoon or a dinosaur, it doesn't matter. But as you're creating the avatar, more recently, we have been tying them to personal accounts. More specifically, if we're thinking about Facebook, now Meta, to their social media accounts. But what we are seeing now is a shift from singular identity to a pluralized notion of identity in the metaverse, because you don't have to have just one avatar, which creates certain problems, but also affords other negotiations of identity as you move from platform to platform. So therefore, we have impersonal number identification systems that we will need in order to be able to identify people in the real world. Now, per the title of this talk, we should talk about the concept of digital embodiment, whereas we find that avatars and what they look like can help you define yourself and who you want to be or portray in a virtual realm. We know that massive multiplayer online games such as World of Warcraft and Fortnite also afford similar ways in which to come up with a kind of digital idealized version of who you would like to present to the world, which is not limited by your physical appearance. Now, this also helps kind of reflect an extension of one's own self-identity. And very importantly, for almost half of the population, which are introverted and or especially neurodivergent populations, it creates a type of digital safe space because they no longer need to perform this type of social masquerade known as masking. And so instead of focusing on how they appear, what they look like, if they are going to be fidgeting and or doing some type of repetitive motion, they can instead let the avatar provide a type of barrier, which is going to provide a safe space for them. Now, the safe space, we must, of course, address the notion of security here, which was alluded to at the outset, in the sense that currently you can hop between avatars relatively seamlessly, and so therefore levels of security through virtual interactions in the metaverse, depending upon the platform you are in, whether that's going to be Meta's Horizons or these other large multi-planet, multi-world engaging features, you can have multiple accounts, because when you're signing in, people have multiple and different social media accounts for different purposes in their life, whether it be personal or professional. And so just like the movie Free Guy, as you see here, in which the real humans on the outside world can go in and adopt whatever skin for their avatar that they prefer. One, of course, humorously adopts a bunny suit as a Wild West sheriff, but they can change it at will. Now, because we can do that, that creates an important security problem because it's not tied to a specific individual. So we're going to have to develop through blockchain certain types of tracking systems, because right now all we can do is track an IP address. And so that's not tied to an individual. So we find that in the future, we're going to need these types of blockchain securities which identify a particular individual, which also then points to this notion of persistence. That is to say, if you can create an avatar and then virtually enter a world, your avatar does not continue going about its daily life and existing once you log off, right? So there is no persistence. So every time you log in, you're starting over in this way. So for true immersion, we would have to have the ability to seamlessly know what we have been doing in moving into this realm, but that's also made possible with these new digital identifiers if we can say who a person is. Now, there's been a long evolution in avatar creation. If we go back to Second Life at the beginning of the 21st century, which is still going on today, if you want to go check it out, people could create versions of real life individuals, male or female generally, different types of races and ethnicities, though those are originally really limited, different hairstyles, clothing, etc. Now in Web 3, the most recent versions have become incredibly hyper-realistic. So we'll discuss what that entails as well. That being, people can generally now take a photo of themselves and different avatar creators will generate a version of what they look like. Usually up until about now, a very cartoony, kind of abstracted version, looking like it's 3D modeled in Maya or Blender. But we find that if we get too close to what is human and you can tell it's not human, we have the uncanny valley effect. Therefore, we have to think about how realistic we actually want these things to be. And this is very important when considering the applicability of avatars for both work and for education. Being in many studies, we have demonstrated that for education, students often will begin with an avatar that looks pretty much like them. So I would make one that would have a blazer, a beard, and hair that looks like mine, the same color and or consistency, the same complexion, etc. But then what the students would do is eventually start adopting more and more non-human characters, things like robots or animals or cartoon characters. The more comfortable they became, and they said that adopting those allowed them to interact with others much more effectively and with lowered stress levels. Now here we find that the cross-platform interoperability is again going to be paramount moving forward. If you think of Ready Player Me, which is going to be a particular platform that generates avatars, you can then consider the multiverse of metaverses in which you create one avatar and you can drop it into these different platforms, whether you're logging in to Apple's new platform or Meta's or again Microsoft's that's coming up, or if you're going into gaming systems such as Sony or Nintendo, who just partnered with an XR developer as well. So therefore, we need to be able to identify who the avatar belongs to. We need to be able to customize that particular avatar so that it allows us to have a measure of control over our identity and appearance, and that helps kind of reinforce our perceived identity. And then we need to be able to move that same character across these various areas if we get to the true metaverse, which would be, of course, device agnostic and platform agnostic. So we can move anywhere. Now, most recently, you've probably seen these announcements in which the first examples of avatar creators over the last few years since the pandemic have really been based off of a photograph you upload, and then you have this algorithm that creates a kind of cartoony abstract version of your appearance. Now, thanks to the partnership with AI integration, we have the ability to create incredibly hyper-realistic avatars from these scans of one's face. And you have cameras mounted inward, which of course also collect biometric data such as pupil dilation. It can also, in certain examples, collect heart rate, perspiration, and other types of data, so we can tell how people are reacting to things, how anxious and or excited and or bored they are in particular circumstances. But this is, once again, what we have now is the ability with a single headset to automatically create and reflect all of your expressions. That, of course, is not what everyone wants, as we imagine, because some people want a level of anonymity. Therefore, we find that self-fashioning is going to become very common in the digital age as our interactions are more and more virtual. As we're doing this right now, we should note that Post-pandemic, most institutions in industry, even if they were physically located in the same building or even the same office suite, would hold meetings via video conference, whether that's going to be Zoom, Skype, or Teams. So we find that this is just the first step, which will continue to allow us to have more and more personalization with these avatars. In fact, Microsoft just released a version in Microsoft Teams to where you can turn on an avatar filter, and that is available right now at the enterprise level. So as we move forward, we need to consider the importance, the regulation, and security associated with avatars, but also address their benefits, especially to a broad, very diverse population that has different needs. Here are a few references, and of course you can reach out to me at jhudson@lindenwood.edu for more information on this, and I look forward to hearing from you.